Hello everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a weather app. This weather app will display information which it gets from an API and display on the page using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can also search for locations like Denver and it will display weather for any location you enter. Let's get started. To begin, we'll make a boilerplate using the ! emmet shortcut, and we will type in the title as weather app. Now in the body, we'll need to create different parts of our weather app. So inside we'll make a card, because that will display the weather inside of a card. And inside of this card, we have to make the things we need. Let's say we need a search box, so I'll create a search which contains a input, which will have a type text, and we can call it class search bar. And we can have a button which inside should have an icon of a search icon. So we can use the React Icons extension for VS Code to search for icons. I'll look for a search icon, and I'll copy this one, SVG. And we'll paste inside this button. So now this SVG will generate a search icon. Let's make it a width of 1.5 and a height of 1.5 EM. And now let's preview this. So I'm going to use the live server extension so we can see it on our page. Okay, so now we create a search bar and a search button with an icon. Next, we'll need to create the other fields. We'll create an element for our weather, which will have the city. We'll make an H2. I'll fill in placeholder text here so we can see what's going on. We can say weather in Denver. And I will say the temperature. We'll need, let's say 51. Let's get a degrees symbol. So I'll search for a degree symbol. Copy this one. 51 degrees Celsius, let's say. And we'll make an image. This will be like the icon for our weather. We can leave this blank for now. We'll get back to this later. We'll have a class of icon. And then we'll also have the description of the weather. And whether it's partly cloudy or sunny, that will be the description. We'll also have humidity. And we will also have wind. Description, I'll say cloudy. Humidity, I'll say humidity 60%, and wind speed, say 6.2 kilometers per hour. Now let's style this a little bit. I'll need to link a style sheet, so I'm going to say link rel equals style sheet, and href is going to be style.css. And we also have a script, so I'll add that as well. The source of this is going to be script.js. Now let's start on the style sheet. I like to do it within the developer tools, so I'll open this up over here. And we'll start off by making the body a flexbox, because this will allow us to center the card on the page. So I'm going to make a new element body. Inside we'll say display flex, justify content center, align item center. Let's make it have the height of the full viewport height, so let's say 100 VH. We'll zoom in over here. And over here we'll say margin of 0 because we don't want it to go over the viewport height, so that way we don't have the scroll bar over here when it's not necessary. And let's say we put a background. For now it will be just a solid color, let's say 222. We can make it have an image later on. Okay, now let's style this card and add a selector for the card. We'll say background, let's say EA, that'll be like a light gray color. We'll need to add some padding there, so say padding 1EM, 2EM, let's say, and we'll make it have rounded corners, border radius of, let's say, 30 pixels, width of 100%, but we don't want to always have the full width. We'll also want to have a max width of, let's say, 420 pixels, so that way it will only take up this much space. If you have a large screen, on a small screen, it will fill the entire viewport, but maybe we still want a margin around there, so I'll add a margin as well of 1EM. So now we have this box that works on all screen sizes. So let's add these to the style sheet. Click on inspector.style sheet and copy this into style.css. And now when we reload this page, it'll still be applied. Let's get a font from Google Fonts. I think Open Sans is a good font, so we will get this from Google Fonts. You just have to just select the style you like. Let's say select this style, and when you're ready, click on this button at the top. You can copy paste this part into the head, and then we can paste this part anywhere we want to apply Open Sans font. So let's apply this to the body, and now we have Open Sans font. Let's make this degrees for the temperature a little bit bigger, so we can actually make this an H1 tag. Now make it bigger. Now let's get like a nice background image. You can go to Unsplash. You can actually say source.unsplash.com. This will allow us to get random images from Unsplash with a random search term. You can copy this link. I'll set this as the body background image. We'll say background image of URL, and then parentheses this URL over here. And let's say we want the search to be a landscape, so we'll get like nature photos. Let me move this up so the background is together, and now when we reload this page we see a landscape picture in our background. Let's make this background a little bit transparent. Let's say we make it 0, 0, but also have a transparency of D0. So now we get this. Let's make the text white. Let's say color white. Okay, and now let's style the search box a little bit. We have .search as our search box. So you can say .search. Let's make this a flexbox as well, so we can align things in the center. Display flex, align items center, and then we can put space around. You can say justify content. You can say space around. Actually, let's make this center. Okay. We just need to put some margin around these inner elements. Let's go back to our developer tools to customize this. For the button, we'll need to have, let's say, margin of 0.5 EM. And let's say we make it round, so let's say border radius, say 50%. Border none, to get rid of the border there. We'll make the height be the same as the width, so let's say 2 EM, and let's make it maybe 2.5 EM, and a width of 2.5 EM. Okay, and then let's make the input box similar. We can say border none. Also want to get rid of that outline, so let's say outline none. The button has the outline as well, so let's get rid of that as well. Outline none. Going back to the input, let's say padding 1em. Now let's make it like 0.8 em. We'll make a border radius. We don't want to use 50% because that will actually make it like an oval shape. We make a number that's half of the height, which is 18. We'll make the border have a rounded edge like a half circle. And let's make the background color of this be, let's say 0000000. Actually, let's make it a lighter color. So let's make it 7C, 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 2B, let's say. That's going to make like a faint whitish search box. Let's make the color of this white, so we have white text in here. So now we have this. We also want the font family to be open sans. Let's say font family inherit. That will get it from the parent. And let's say the font size is 120%. Make this bigger. And now that we make the font bigger, this increase in size, now our border radius is not perfectly rounded. I will lower the padding a little bit. Let's make it like 0.5. And we'll increase the border radius. Now the height is 46. Let's make it 24. And inside we could have a little bit more padding on the left and right. So let's say 1em over here to make more inner padding than on top and bottom. Now we have like a nice search box. For the button, we can make this a little bit larger. Let's say we'll make it match the height over here. So we'll make this like 46 pixels. And 46 pixels. And also we'll have the same background. Say background 7C, 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 2B. Make the color white as well. And when we hover on it, we also want to apply effects. So let's say button hover. We can actually apply the hover state here so we can see what it'll look like. We can say background of, let's say we make it a little bit less transparent. So it's going to be a bit brighter. So when we hover, I'll remove this temporarily, you can hover over it and it'll show it lighter. Now let's add a cursor pointer here. That way we'll get the mouse over to have a pointer. And also we can add transition. Let's say transition 0.2 seconds ease in out. And that will make it so we get a nice smooth transition when we hover over the box. Let's add all of this to our CSS. Now let's also make this search box a little bit bigger. We can say width 100%, but we don't want it to go all the way to get this magnifying glass. We can actually say calc 100% minus 50 pixels, or even let's say 80 pixels to leave some room for the magnifying glass, and then it'll fill this entire width. So let's copy this as well. Okay, and let's add a placeholder to this search box. You can say placeholder equals search. Now I'll get the word search here. You can make the text a little bit bigger by saying font size, say 120% to change like the default font size. Make sure I have a semicolon over here. Right now everything's bigger. We can remove the margin around this temperature, so you can say margin 0 to make it a little bit closer in. So I can add that as well to the CSS. we'll put this at the bottom. We'll have these like in the order that they appear on the page. I think this could be a bit smaller, so I'll make this a little bit smaller. Say, make this 105%, and have less padding on the top. Say 0.4 EM. I think that's good. And the button, we will have to make it the same height. So this is 44. So we can make this, say, 44 pixels as well. And we can go to style and copy this entire style sheet. Now let's take a look at the JavaScript. I'll create an object for storing the functions and variables that will be necessary for using the API. First, we'll need an API key to access weather. I'm going to get my weather from openweathermap.org. So I'm going to go to openweathermap.org, and you have to click sign in. So we need to create an account over here. Click create an account. Check the rest of these boxes, and confirm you're not a robot. Verify your email address, and then we're ready to get started with the API. So you need to click on API keys over here, and we get an API key we can use for this app. So I'm going to copy this and put it into our field API key. This will be useful when using the API. You can go to the API over here and click on API doc to see what this API is capable of. Here you see we can have a city name as a parameter here, and the API key is a second parameter. So let's try this. We can open this in a new tab, api.openweathermap.org. We'll put, let's say, Denver, and for the app ID I'll put the API key. It says invalid API key. If you see invalid API key, it means that they're still waiting to process your API key, so you have to just wait a little bit longer, like maybe half an hour to an hour, and it should be working correctly. Once your API key is activated, you should see this information when you access this page. I'm using the JSON Viewer Chrome extension to make this a prettier format, but you might see it like as just text. I definitely recommend getting the JSON Viewer extension if you want to see nicely formatted data like this. So you'll see that over here we have the name of the city for name over here at the bottom. We have the description is clear sky. We have an icon, which is a code that they use on their website. You see on their website they have different icons, like this one over here. If you open a new tab, you'll notice that it ends with 01N as the icon over here. And that's the icon code. Base, stations, temp. So this is the temperature. That's not in Fahrenheit or Celsius. So we'll need to make sure that we understand the documentation of this API to know how we can get into the right format. So here we have units, and we could say metric. So I'll say as a parameter to this API, and units equals metric. And now it says it's 2.93 degrees, and that is Celsius. Okay, now we get the minimum maximum temperature, wind speed, we get humidity over here, and all of this information is accessible from this API. So let's copy this into our code, because we'll be able to use a URL like this in order to get information about the weather. So I'll create a function called fetchWeather, which will be a function that doesn't take any parameters and will just do fetch of a URL. So we'll give it the URL, let's say this one, and then we'll say .then. That will be, once it's fetched this URL, it will do the response, and we'll say response.json, and then we can say .then. We can take that data and let's say log the data in the console for now. So now let's see what happens when we go to the console and type in weather.fetchWeather. It logs in the console this information about the weather. Great. Now we just need to allow it to work with any city. So here we have Q equals Denver. So let's, instead of saying Denver, we'll say plus city, which would be a parameter. And instead of app ID here, we already have the app ID stored over there, so we can just say plus app key is what I think we called it. Separate this onto multiple lines so we can see it more easily. So we have the first part of the URL, then city, units equals metric, and app ID equals app key. We can write a new function that will display the weather on the page. So we can write a function display weather. That will be the function that will take in the data and display the weather. Now over here we have the parameter city, which is definitely important, so let's put city as a parameter over here, so when we call fetch weather, we'll just have to tell it what city, and we'll look it up for any city. So now if you notice, actually it says there's a missing parentheses. Alright, so we can't have a semicolon there. So now you notice we call weather.fetchWeather with Denver, API key, not app key. If we call this with Denver, API key is not defined, sorry, it's this.API key. Great, now we have the weather for Denver, and if we call this with a different city, like Tokyo, you'll get different weather, since it's the weather for Tokyo. You can see name Tokyo there. So yeah, this is working. Now to display the weather, we'll have to find all the elements on the page and replace their content. So in the data, we can look at what this looks like over here. We did an example of what the data looks like. So first, to get the city name, we can just say const name. This will get it out of the data. We can say it equals data, and now this will extract the name from this object. The other top level stuff we don't need, but then over here we have inside weather we have some information like it's the description we want and the icon we want. So let's say const icon and description equals data.weather. So now this will get the data.weather object and extract the icon and description, and we'll be able to use those as the variables. And then const for main, we want temp and humidity. So let's say temp humidity equals data.main. And lastly, we'll need the wind speed, so we'll say const speed equals data.wind. So data.wind contains speed, so speed is going to be taken out of that object and made into a variable. So now we have different variables. We can log these in the console. Let's say name, icon, description, temp, humidity, and speed. And instead of console.log here, we will write this.displayWeather. Now let's check this out. We say fetch weather. It logs out all 5 of these things. Here it says undefined, undefined. Let's see what might have caused that. So we're taking from data.weather because this isn't actually an array containing this object and not the object itself. So you can just put a 0 here and it'll get the first element of the data.weather object and it'll extract the icon description from there. So now if we run this again, you get 04n is the icon and broken clouds is the description. Okay, now we just need to display this information on the page. So let's say document.querySelector. Let's say city.innerText equals weather in and we'll attach the name over there. So now, when we say Tokyo, we need to make sure it says dot city because it's the class name of city. It says weather in Tokyo, but then the rest of this information is still not changed. So we have to make sure we change all the other information as well. So document.querySelector.icon. We can set the source of this. We have the example URL over here. So let's just copy this and replace where it says the icon ID. We can just insert inside of here the icon. Okay, and now we have the icon, and it shows up over here. We can make this smaller by removing that at 2 times. Now we get a smaller icon over here. Next we can say document.querySelector of the description, and we'll say .innerText equals description, and we can say document.querySelector of the temperature. We'll set the inner text to be temp, and we'll also add on the degree symbol. Let's get that from our HTML, degrees Celsius. And then next we have the humidity and the wind speed. So let's say .humidity, humidity dot inner text equals the humidity. Say humidity colon plus humidity, and then add a percent symbol after that. And lastly, the wind speed. I think we called it dot wind. So it's dot wind, and we'll say wind speed of speed. I'll say kilometers per hour. And now let's fetch the weather for Tokyo. And we got 9.71 degrees Celsius, broken clouds, humidity 62%, and wind speed is 3.6 kilometers per hour. Now we're nearly done. Let's just make a few adjustments to the styling over here before we get to the search bar. For the description we can say text transform, capitalize. Now make all these words capitalize. So that's a cool feature. And also the icon description, you could put those on the same line because the icon is described by the description. So let's say dot icon. We will create a flexbox. So first I will copy my changes here. I'll put the description there, and we'll make a flexbox around the icon and description. We'll say like dot flex, and you just put that around there because all we need this to do is just display flex. So we'll say dot flex is display flex, and we also want a line item center, and we don't need justify content center because we want it to be left aligned. Let's put a default image in here actually. Let's like copy this image address and put it over here. And let's add a little bit more space below the temperature. Say margin bottom of, let's say 10 px. Let's say 1 em, a lot less than that, 0.5. Okay. Go with 0.4, and now we have the cloudy and the icon aligned. You can actually like put a little bit on the left, some margin. So margin left on the description will be, let's say 10 pixels. And it'll actually maybe a little less, let's make 8. And now that's good. We have this icon aligned with the text, and this looks pretty good. So now what we need to do is just make this search bar work. So first thing I'll do is I'll say document.querySelector of dot let's get the button. We'll say dot search button. We'll say add an event listener of click, and then the click, when we click it, it's going to do a function. The function is going to be, we just need to search for the weather. So we can create a function here called search, and all this is going to do is just get the content of the search bar. So we'll say document.query selector of the search bar dot value. That's going to be what we're searching for. So we can say this dot fetch weather of this. And let's say over here, weather dot fetch weather, not fetch weather, search, and this will automatically get the content of the search bar and search for it. And now you can actually try this out. Let's say Tokyo here, click search. It says can't add event listener. I think we need to make this run at the end of the JavaScript, so we can say defer here because this was loading at the very beginning before the button was created, so that's why it was not actually able to add the event listener, because this button didn't exist when it was trying to call this line. So now if we say defer in the script, it will check only at the end for this button. So now if we try this again, we can say Tokyo, click search, and it says weather in Tokyo. And Denver, you'll get the weather in Denver. And now let's just add an event listener to the input box for when they press the enter key. So we can do that by saying document.query selector, and on the search bar you'll add an event listener of key up. Now this function will actually take in the event as the parameter, so say event, and we can say if event.key is equal to enter, then weather.search. And now if we type in something and press enter, it will search for it as well. Let's remove this log statement because we're no longer testing it. And now let's say we want to make sure that this dummy text over here that we just insert randomly into HTML doesn't get displayed when they load the page until you can actually display weather. So you can also, when the page loads, we can call the weather.fetchWeather function. Say weather.fetchWeather Denver when they load the page, and they can search for a new location when they want. But you notice when we load the page, until it finishes fetching the weather, we get the wrong information. So we don't want to see that. So let's say we start out with a class of loading on this weather. So we'll say weather loading, and when we have weather loading, we'll display none. So we can hide the dummy text by saying .weather.loading. We'll say visibility hidden, and when we load to the weather, when we do call display weather, we will remove that. So we'll say document.query selector .weather, and then we'll say .classlist .remove. So this will remove it if it's there and won't do anything if it's not. So after the first time, will still be, this line will still work without a problem. You can say .remove of loading. And now, as soon as the weather loads, it shows up. Now let's say we want to give some feedback that's loading. We could make a loader, or we can just say the word loading. You can do that by making after pseudo element. We can say visibility visible, and we'll say content is loading, color white. Now we have the word loading there. Let's make this shorter. We can say max height 20 pixels. And now we get 20 pixels there. We want to position relative here. and a position absolute here to make it so that these pseudo elements will actually be aligned where the original content started. Let's make sure we say top 0, and now we have loading, and it gets replaced with a content. Let's actually move it a little bit more to the right. We can say left 20 pixels, and now we get loading, and it gets replaced by weather. This is good. Let's say we type in Tokyo, it replaces with Tokyo as soon as that loads. Now these background images are just generic landscapes. We can actually get photos from each city using different search terms with Unsplash. So let's copy this URL, and over here we're going to say document.body.style.background image. We're going to set that equal to URL, and in here the same URL, but instead of saying landscape here, I will insert in the middle the city name. So I'll say name. So now when we say weather in Denver, it gets us a picture from the search term Denver. If I search Tokyo, it will give us a Tokyo picture. So now we get this picture of a chef making Japanese food. Now we can search London, and we get a picture of London. And I think this is where I'll leave you off for this video. I hope you learned something. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content just like this. Please let me know in the comments what you want to see me do next. Have a great day. Bye.